the circus in town. Tonight at Madison Square Garden, Game 5 between the New York Rangers and the Florida Panthers. More on the big night coming up as the show rolls on. For the first time in 2 weeks, I have written and produced a brand new Evan and Tiki song, an exclusive. That's coming up a little bit later on. And the New York Knicks have a looming threat. But let's start with the circus. The circus is in town on Wednesday, May 29th, and we were lucky enough to be on the air for a lot of it. The New York Mets embarked on a day from hell. A day that started in hell and a day that ended in hell. Now, we were lucky enough to be around and talk about Edwin Diaz going on the IL. We were live on the air when Pete Alonso got drilled in the hand. Good news, everything came back clean. He's got a bone bruise.
For now.
He's day to day.
For now.
For now.
Last time we heard about a bone bruise, DJ LeMahieu was working out on his foot, and 2 months later, he's just finishing his rehab assignment.
That's a really good point. We'll see when he plays again.
Exactly.
The Mets then proceeded to come back and then lose a game terribly. While we were off the air, Jorge Lopez got ejected from the game because Ramon de Jesus is a big crybaby. And when Jorge was walking off the mound, he threw his glove. Let's start right there. Tiki Barber, First of all, how you doing?
I'm doing well.
Good.
I was entertained yesterday.
Yeah, were you?
Even though it was a little depressing for Met fans, I was entertained, especially when Jorge Lopez gets tossed and untucks his shirt,
Yes.
which is also a no-no and unprofessional,
Yes.
and then tosses his glove into the stand. And when you read about it, and this will come back around, the narrative that was presented about Jorge Lopez at the end of this game, when you read about it, it's like he threw it angrily in the stands, and he was mad and pissed off. When I watched it, it was kind of like he was like, "Ah, here, have my glove. I mean, I'm out of here anyways."
Yes.
He had, because the net, like, it wasn't like he just threw it and someone was in danger because he was right in front of him. He had to toss it way up in the air. It was underhand and like, "Hey, have my glove. I don't care. Whatever." Right? I was actually laughing at Jorge Lopez because if you're mad, it's a good way to let off steam. Like, have my glove. I don't want it anymore. It sucked. It hasn't done well for me.
Bingo. This was not a problem. Okay? This was not a freaking problem.
No.
We're going to start with step number 1. Trust me, we'll get to step number 6. But step number 1, and nobody was watching, okay? So everybody saw it on YouTube or they saw it after it went viral because at that point in the game, everybody's checked out. And there's nobody at Citi Field either. But Jorge Lopez threw his glove over a net into the stands. He was upset. He was upset for good reason. He was upset that he's on a crappy team. He's upset that he didn't get a call that he thought he should have gotten, even though there was no way Freddie Freeman's check swing was a actual swing. But nevertheless, as a professional athlete, you're frustrated. And that's okay. And as a Met fan, I'm frustrated too. I sat around after the show yesterday and watched the remainder of the game because I'm a sucker, because I'm a loser, and because I wanted to believe the Mets were going to win that game. They didn't. And when Jorge Lopez threw his glove, I had no issue with it. Now, the broadcasters did. Gary Cohen and Ron Darling acted like Jorge Lopez stole a cat. Okay, so I'm going to start right there because I want to be honest with every single person who listens. When he threw his glove, I was not offended, I was not bothered, and I certainly didn't think he needed to be DFA'd. If anything, he was doing the fans a favor. I'm going to the game tonight. I think it would be badass if I got a glove. I'm going to the game on Sunday.
Right. Somebody walked away with a fantastic souvenir.
Worst part was it was a Yankee fan. The guy was decked out in Yankee gear.
Was he really?
Yes, but this is no different than an NBA player after they're thrown out of a game or maybe they're hurt or maybe they picked up their 6th foul, taking their headband off and throwing it into the stands. Let's not act like Jorge Lopez threw a nuclear weapon into the crowd. That's BS number 1. So I didn't have an issue with it. That's just me. Now, Tiki?
I didn't have an issue with it either.
No issue with it.
No issue. I thought it was humorous.
Okay.
It's an emotional explosion in a moment, and you want to do something. You won't want to yell because you've already probably yelled enough, and you just forget it. Let me throw my glove. We see it all the time in sports.
Yes,
different iterations of it, but we see it all the time. So I actually was entertained by Jorge Lopez's frustration. It was like a sick humor watching his frustration boil over to the point where he's throwing away a glove. Not that he can't get another one, but he just threw away a glove.
I think it's like I'll never forget, and I'll give you a somewhat comparison. And please, I'm not talking about the human and how everybody should sign him. But Trevor Bauer once showed up Terry Francona. Terry Francona came to the mound to take him out of the game, and Trevor Bauer turned around and pelted a baseball over the center field wall.
Yeah.
Now, to Trevor Bauer's credit, I think he admitted, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done that. That showed up his manager. That was bad. That was really, really bad. What happened yesterday was Jorge Lopez was me. Jorge Lopez was Loogie. Jorge Lopez was every Met fan who was just angry. That's step number one. Let's go to step number two. Step number two, Carlos Mendoza sits in front of the New York media and says those actions were unacceptable. Okay? Now, Carlos Mendoza is not Evan Roberts. He's not Tommy Lugauer. He's not Sal. He's not you. He has a right as a manager to say, look, we need to be professional. I did not like that. So I got no problem with Carlos Mendoza having a different opinion than me.
Right. You agree with both. You agree with Jorge Lopez because he was expressing his frustration, but you also see where the manager's coming from.
Yep.
It's unprofessional. You don't want those kind of outbursts in public. It's not something that a professional team should do.
Fair enough.
Right.
Now we get to number three. Number three, and in my opinion, this is where Jorge Lopez got DFA'd, okay? We'll get to step four. Everyone loves to talk about step four, the worst effing team, whatever he actually said. But step three is where Jorge Lopez got DFA'd. Jorge Lopez cannot sit in front of the media after he talked to his manager and general manager. That happened, by the way. And when he's asked, do you regret it? Say no. Can't do that. You can't do it. You got to come out and say, I do regret it. I was frustrated. I spoke to Mendy. Never going to happen again. Once you come out publicly and openly defy your manager, unless you're a superstar, you're done.
Yeah, and by the way, that's the crux here. Jorge Lopez is not a superstar. He hasn't been one this year. He's actually been pretty terrible this season. And so the fact that he is he is dismissing his manager's concern and at the same time making light of it, he's not a non-superstar. You're gone.
You can't do that.
You're right. I mean, you probably shouldn't do it, even if you are a superstar. But if you're not a superstar, you're expendable.
Well,
period.
look, here's the difference. And I was thinking
not
about
even a superstar, just a star, just a viable player.
I agree, and I was thinking about you because I'm working here with a professional athlete. I'm working with an athlete who had a head coach who could sometimes be mad at every little thing. If you openly defied the head coach, no one's ever going to say we should cut Tiki Barber.
Right.
We'd have a discussion about it.
Of course.
You may get criticized, but if the third-string backup center openly defied Tom Coughlin, he gone.
Yes, and that's exactly kind of what happened.
That's exactly what happened. Now, here's the part where I have compassion. Okay, and this is something that does mean a lot to me. This is something I'm passionate about. This is something that I had to learn from my wife and had to learn from my mother-in-law and father-in-law, whose second language is English. Okay, and this is damn serious. Their second language is English. There are times in which when we have a conversation, things can be misinterpreted. Jorge Lopez was left on an island yesterday, and you guys in the media ran him over. I don't know if he said, this is the worst effing team I've been with. And then even after, when he's asked for clarification, because I want to get that right out of the way too. Up in heaven, they asked for clarification. I don't know if he understood what the hell the clarification was.
Right. Or what are you talking about?
I don't think he knew.
Yeah.
And I
agree with that.
I saw this with Carlos Gomez years ago. Remember the former Met prospect, where he tried to speak English to the media. He didn't have an interpreter with him. And his words were printed exactly the way he said it. And unfortunately, for him, it was in a way that he deemed embarrassing. It was broken English.
Yes.
And usually, reporters will help clean that up. That's why a lot of athletes who are learning a language says, hey, I want to be protected behind an interpreter because I don't want this to happen. Now, I don't know Jorge Lopez. And again, Does he deserve to be DFA'd after he has a meeting with the general manager and the manager? They tell him this can't happen. Sure. But I'm sitting there, and I give Loogie a lot of credit, too. He did the same damn thing. We're sitting there on social media last night saying, I don't think he said this is the worst effing team in MLB. I don't think he said that. Loogie thought the same. Did you think he said that?
So I saw the headline, and then I listened to it like 10 times, like it was the Warren Report, and I'm like, he said teammate.
Yeah. Well, he swallowed the mate. So he's trying to say teammate, but it's probably an odd word to translate from from English to Spanish, or in his mind, Spanish to English. And so he started to say team. He didn't finish it.
Right. And in the setup, if you hear his setup, he's talking about himself.
Right.
So for him to pivot to saying this is the worst team, it doesn't add up.
No.
It was obviously he was talking about himself. And then there was a follow-up question, but even in the follow-up, he wasn't very clear that he was saying this team is the worst team. I'm sorry. You ask a follow-up question there, that follow-up question was even more confusing.
No, and here's what happened, okay? Couple of things happened. Number one, it was printed by those in the room as if they knew for sure what he said.
Yes.
Okay? That's number one. Number two, and here's the other thing that also happened. There is, and I said this about the Knicks, and it happens with the Mets now, there is an LOL Mets tendency. I get it, they suck. You don't need me to remind you of that. We all know they're bad. We all know yesterday was a day from hell. So what some people do when they see, oh, my God, a Met player said this is the worst effing team in MLB. I love this. LOL Mets, is everybody runs with it. Here is a guy, okay, and he's been through a lot in his life, which Boomer pointed out earlier this morning, and that's fine. I'm good. You know, it's out there. It's been out there for a while. But here's a guy whose second language is English. He did not have an interpreter with him last night. He is on his own trying to answer questions. And we all jumped to the conclusion of we know exactly what he meant. And I don't want to hear while they followed up with him. Was the interpreter there? Yeah. Should there have been? Can someone help this guy out? Because I don't think he knew what was happening. And the proof of that is he goes on Instagram today to says, hey, let me clarify. I meant teammate.
Right. Well, he said teammate. Forget meant. He said teammate. Forget interpreting. The words out of his mouth were teammate. Right? It was teammate. Right?
Yes.
To me, that's teammate. It's not team. Right? If he wanted to say team, he would have been dead on about it. He was clearly talking about himself. And unless you're trying to hear him say what everybody was reporting, that it was team, you're trying to make a story. You're trying to make a headline. And that's exactly what happened to him. And as he said on his Instagram post, thank you, media, for making it worse.
Well, they did.
I'm
sorry.
Now, granted, to your point, it's not why he was DFA'd.
No. I think it was the defiance on the glove-throwing incident.
It was the unprofessionalism. It was the defiance, as you just said. It was all the things, and the fact that he's not a star that made him expendable.
It's easy to say, hey, we're going to make this guy an example.
Right, but the headline that makes the most sense is he says the Mets are the worst team in Major League Baseball, therefore they DFA him. Great story. Sounds fun.
Oh, and it adds to LOL Mets.
There you go.
It adds to that. And look, the Mets don't need anything added to LOL Mets. They're bad. Okay, I'll raise my hand. I've been wrong about the New York Mets. They have a lot of issues. This isn't necessary to add to the agenda of LOL Mets. But it was so typical of everything that somehow finds this franchise over the last 25 years. And it sucks, man. Like, I think I speak for every Met fan. We may disagree on a lot of things, Met fans. We may disagree on players we like, players we dislike, how we should go about building the team, and lots of things. But the one thing we could all agree on is it always seems to find us. We always seem to be the butt of every freaking joke for a myriad of reasons. And that's why, coming up at 3 o'clock today, I'm unveiling the LOL Mets list. Because I went through all of those moments. And look, a lot of those moments are blown out of proportion. Some of those moments are well-deserved. Some of those moments you look at and say, oh, my God, I can't believe we employed that guy, and that guy did this. So I won't hide from the LOL moments, but I thought what happened last night was something got turned into something it wasn't.
Yeah.
And I have compassion because, look, England is they speak English in England?
They do.
But if I was, I'm making a joke. If I was going to a country where they don't speak English and I was learning Spanish, and man, I try to learn Spanish. I do. Like I said, my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, they know it. My wife, fluent in it. My kids, learning it. I can't speak Spanish in front of the public. I'd embarrass myself. And you know what? You know what would scare me half to death? If I had the balls right now to use everything I've learned to speak Spanish in front of you. Because I'm like, you know what?
Especially when you're emotional.
Yeah, and I'm emotional too, right? I'm going to break down the Mets with a Spanish-led rant. I can promise you I'll screw up. And I can promise you I'll say something I didn't mean to say. And I can promise you if someone wants to just post it, literally how I said it, they'll make me look like an ass and they'll bury me. And that's why I don't have the same balls that Jorge Lopez has. I don't have the same guts that Francisco Alvarez has. I admire these guys because I don't have those guts. And by the way, most of you guys don't have the guts either because I'm afraid. I use my words for a living. Imagine I tried to talk and then I just...
Evan, most people won't talk in English. In an English-speaking country, they won't do those things. They won't stand up and be accountable. They won't stand up and express themselves. They just won't. And so I give Jorge Lopez credit. First of all, going back to the actions on the field, I was entertained by it because it typifies exactly what's happening with this Mets team right now. And it felt exactly what the Mets are right now. And then all the stuff afterwards, you kind of start to feel sympathy for him. Not that he's likely to be in a better place. He'll get picked up somewhere else.
Oh, trust me, he'll be in a better place.
Who knows if he finds his stride, so to speak, and he's a contributor for someone else, right? But at the end of the day, we're making a huge story about something that's only a big story because the Mets are so bad. If the Mets weren't this bad, this would be a one-day snap of the finger event, and we wouldn't even think about it. But because they're so bad, it just adds on to everything else that we've talked about this Mets team for the last 2 months.
They are bad. That is a true statement. And we'll take your calls on that, including Jorge Lopez, at our brand new toll-free number, which is 888-808-1019. Coming up at 3 o'clock, the definitive list of the top LOL moments of the last 20 years. But the other thing that came out of yesterday that could be important, but also bothers me, is the timing and the decision by the leaders of this team to have a team meeting. Will it make any difference? Tiki will bring us into what a team meeting is actually like. And, of course, your calls, 888-808-1019.